Good morning, guys. I hope your day is starting off just as fantastic as possible. The question for you today is, can the province of Quebec single-handedly decide who our next prime minister is going to be? The simple answer to that question is, well, yes, it's possible. And I'm going to show you why. Let's get right into it. Now, guys, I'm going to use statistics and analysis, okay? I'm not just going to spout rhetoric. Let's try and look at some actual data here. This is the polling averages for the province of Quebec from October 2021 until the present. And I'm going to direct your attention to just a few places on this graph. The Conservatives' polling average, popular vote in Quebec, is in this black line in the middle here. And I'm just going to show you on the screen here. So this black line, I want to draw your attention to this dip right here. Generally, the line has been trending up slightly until recently, but for 3 years trending up, with one kind of dip down here, April and May of 2023. What happened in April and May of 2023? I'll tell you because I've searched out the news articles. That spring in Quebec, Quebec experienced massive flooding in many, many different places. And what was in the news in Quebec was stories about climate change and how the effect of climate change is affecting Quebecers' lives. And the effect for the voters in Quebec was to pull away from one party, the party that they thought was the least effective in dealing with the climate issues. And the support went directly to the Bloc, which is in the blue here. That looked like they went up for that couple of months. Then as time went by, the trend started to normalize again and get back to where it was. And I'm going to point now your attention to this little dip right here. Okay, can you see that? Where in December they were polling around 23%, and then they just dipped down 2 or 3 points, 21%, January 23rd. Well, what happened in January of 2024? Well, I'll tell you what happened. The big story then in Quebec, all right, I'm speaking just of Quebec, not nationally. The big story in Quebec was something that Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservative Party, posted and talked about at that time. And this happened, I'll read it to you here, January 18th. On January 18th, Pierre Poilievre was reacting to a recent report from the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. The report showed that there was a significant dip in the number of homes being built in Quebec in 2023 compared to the previous year. So Pierre posted on the platform X, and I quote, "Massive drop in construction in Quebec while Trudeau's giving billions to the incompetent mayors of Montreal and Quebec City." And he goes on to talk about how the Liberals have broken the housing market and that the mayors of Montreal and Quebec are incompetent. Well, that was not received very well in Quebec. And the response from one of the mayors was, "Before calling anyone incompetent, Mr. Poilievre should understand that in Quebec, federal funding for housing does not go through the cities, but through the provincial government." And both the mayor of Montreal and Quebec City responded, and it was in the news. And I guess the Conservatives took a little bit of a dip there and then kept back on their trend. If we go to Ontario, this really had no effect on the Conservatives' general trend sloping upwards the whole time. No real dip in January or April. In fact, you can check all the provinces, and really there was no correlation anywhere else other than Quebec. Let's go back to the Quebec graph here, and you could say, well, so what? There was a few comments a couple of times where the Conservatives dipped. So what? In fact, these comments played out really well in Western Canada, where it didn't affect their popularity at all. Probably made their popularity go up, which is, on a little bit of an aside, a little bit ironic that a leader can post insults of two elected officials in another province, and his supporters in Western Canada would just immediately believe and accept that and say, yeah, those mayors in Quebec and Montreal, they sure are incompetent. Boy, they're wasting a ton of money. What's going on? And it played really well to his base, I guess. And again, if I keep going down this path, if you polled 1,000 people in Alberta and Saskatchewan and you asked them, Could you name the mayor of Montreal and the mayor of Quebec City? If you asked 1,000 people that question, you probably have 998 that would say, well, I don't know. And there would be 2 maybe that would be able to give you the answer. And those 2 would be 2 people from Quebec that are on vacation in Saskatchewan. So it's just mind-boggling to me that this is how politics works, that leaders can just spout rhetoric and entice their base, and this is the way we do politics. But that's besides the point. Let's just stick to the numbers here. Now in Quebec, we're seeing the Liberals skyrocket straight up, and most of that, I've said in previous videos, is due to the effect of Donald Trump's tariffs and threats of annexation are really worrying Quebecers. But also in the news cycle in Quebec now, as people are campaigning, this is an election campaign now, some of the Bloc and the Liberal candidates are saying, remember that guy that wants to be prime minister now, the guy that insulted your mayor in Montreal and your mayor in Quebec City. And remember, the mayor of Montreal and the mayor of Quebec City were elected by the people that live there that also vote in federal elections. And they were insulted a year ago, and that's being brought back up now. It's just how much of a difference is that going to make? Is it going to make a 0.5% difference or a 1% difference? Well, it could be much, much more than that for 2 reasons. Number one, Quebec is one province that is very tactical in the way they vote and can vote strategically, and they've been known to do that. But more importantly, let's stick to the numbers here. There's really only 2 provinces that can carry an election almost entirely on their own. And if we look at this display here, forget the numbers, okay? I'm not going to talk about the polling today, but let's just look at the number of seats. For example, Saskatchewan and Manitoba here have 28 seats between the 2 of them, 14 seats each. So you have to get 172 seats or more to form a majority. Saskatchewan cannot carry the election on their own. Mathematically impossible. They have, I believe, 14 seats. Manitoba cannot carry the national election on its own. Manitoba, I think, also has 14 seats. Atlantic Canada has 32 seats. Atlantic Canada is 4 provinces. Prince Edward Island cannot carry the election. New Brunswick cannot carry the election. Nova Scotia cannot carry the election, and neither can Newfoundland. On their own, they simply cannot. It's mathematically impossible. In fact, even Alberta here, Alberta, which is heavily conservative, has 37 seats. They're starting to get to a level where 37 is a bigger number, but Alberta has voted predominantly 100% almost conservative in the past 3 elections, and they're not able to carry a national election in Canada. Even British Columbia, which has a few more seats, 43, they can't carry a national election. And British Columbia always seems to be to have Liberal, Conservative, and NDP. They don't tend to go all for one party. So that leaves Ontario, which has 122 seats. And if you just think about that number, 122 seats is already almost a minority win. If Ontario goes one way, they can pretty much carry the election on their own. But Ontario rarely does go all for one party. And the reason is most of the rural areas in Ontario tend to go Conservative, and most of the densely populated areas tend to be battles between the Liberals and the NDP and the Conservatives. And it's a very dynamic population there. So it's very difficult for one party to win all the seats in Ontario. It rarely happens, okay? But Quebec, let's go to Quebec. Quebec has 78 seats. 78 seats. That's, it's like Alberta and British Columbia combined. But Quebec does have the potential to swing completely to support one party. And this is what usually happens with Quebec. When the election is really not that important, or there's not an issue that's really contentious, or it's just kind of like, meh, it's going to be an election, Quebec usually elects a big chunk of the Bloc Québécois candidates. 20, 30, 40 seats go to the Bloc. And they do that because they see that the rest of the election is really, it doesn't matter to them either way. They just want to have a strong a representation for themselves in their own province. But when there's a situation where they all decide strategically that we'd rather this party not win, or we'd rather that party win, or when the election campaign starts and in the news cycle is the guy that's running for prime minister now is the guy that insulted the mayor of Montreal and the mayor of Quebec, and there's a threat now of annexation from the U.S. That's a huge issue for Quebec. Quebec is fiercely independent and wants not. If you did a poll in Quebec, how many people want to be the 51st state in Quebec? It would be 99.99% no. And the 0.01% would be like one American that's there on vacation. So there is a chance that in this election, Quebec may be the province that decides on their own who our next prime minister is going to be. And if we just look at Quebec here, just look at that province and go back to the graph here, you will see that perhaps Quebecers are strategically thinking of this election, at least to this point. Okay, there's still 4 weeks to go. But you can see that they've abandoned the NDP. The NDP have gone from 12% down to 6%. They've lost 50% of their support. They've shifted from the Bloc. The Bloc Québécois had 36%. This is just in January. To now the Bloc is polling at 27%. That's a big drop, 10% drop. That's a 25% drop of the Bloc's support. And even the Conservatives, who had peaked in January, Conservatives were at 27 and are now polling at 21. They've lost 6 percentage points, a little less than a quarter of their support. And the Liberals have captured all of that. The Liberals have gone from 20% to 35%. They've gained 15 percentage points from 20. They've gone up 70%. And my math is probably a little bit off there. You guys can check the math. But just look at the graph. Quebecers are shifting strategically. And the ads and the campaigning, of course, this is an election, right? So the Liberals are going to be pounding that province with negative ads about the Conservatives. That story about Pierre Poilievre insulting the mayors of Montreal and Quebec is back in the news cycle there, right? So if this trend continues and Quebecers vote strategically, even where we are right now, if you translate this into seats, we'll just hit seat projection here. The seat projection now is the Liberals projected to win 37 to 46 seats in Quebec. The Conservatives, 11 to 14 seats in Quebec. So if that continues and the Liberals win on the high trend of that, 46 seats compared to the Conservatives on the low side of the potential, 46 to 11, a difference of 35 seats in just Quebec. That's more seats than Alberta. That's more seats than Saskatchewan and Manitoba. That's more seats than all of Atlantic Canada. And this kind of focusing of the vote doesn't typically happen in Ontario. So, can Quebec single-handedly determine who will be our next prime minister in Canada? The answer is they can. If there's any province that can, it's Quebec. They hold a massive amount of power and they're very focused. They don't really like rhetoric and insults and attack type of politics. They are very, they discuss issues. They sit in coffee shops together, and a person who supports the Bloc and a person who supports the Liberal sit down and over their croissant, they argue and discuss. And they're very politically astute and they're very tuned into politics. And they could all decide, okay, I'm sorry, my friend, that you support the Bloc, but perhaps this time it is better for you to vote for the Liberal. And we stop that Englishman who insult the Quebec mayor. I really like her. She's a very, very nice person. I vote for her, and I do not like him. Okay, we have coffee together, and we elect a few extra Liberals this time, and everything be okay. We look at the stupid English person there and say, fuck you, we are French. We let the baby smoke. Let me know what you guys think. That was a little comedy. You know, you do these political videos and people are getting angry when they watch. What? The Quebecers are going to do what? We need to separate. No, you don't need to separate. You need to learn how to try and garner support across the whole country and not just in your base. That's the idea, and it boggles my mind how certain parties make the same mistake over and over and over again every election cycle. The party that's going to win is the party that's going to be accepted across the whole nation, and I guess that's how it should work. And Quebec has a stranglehold on strategic power. It just does. Let me know what you guys think. Leave some comments, subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying the content, and tell me if you enjoy the quality of my new setup here. Consider being a channel member to help me pay for all this equipment that I had to buy. And I'll catch you guys on the next one.